Tonight, the secret data breach revealed that meant thousands of Afghans had to be moved to the UK. A High Court judge lifts a super injunction so that Parliament and the public can now be told. As many as 100,000 people were affected by the breach, and the relocation costs are expected to be £850 million. Now, it happened under the last Conservative government and it was handed over to Labour. I'll be speaking to the Armed Forces Minister, Luke Pollard. Also tonight, the Chancellor will unveil a new package to try and cut unnecessary red tape for the City of London. We'll look ahead on what we can expect to hear. Plus, Reform UK are on the march, but are they appealing more to women? We've got a special report from our political correspondent, Serena Barker-Singh. The former Conservative Defence Minister, Dame Penny Mordaunt, will also join us live as a new report says anti-Semitism is a stain on British society that refuses to be consigned to history. And on the night of a Chancellor making a big swanky Mansion House speech to the great and the good of high finance, we'll look back at how her predecessors have fared. Andrew Mitchell and Joe Grady's invites to Mansion House must have got lost in the post, so instead they'll be with us for the next hour, and we're very glad about it too. It's Tuesday, I'm Sophy Ridge live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. We start tonight with an astonishing data breach and cover-up. A list, including thousands of Afghans who fought alongside the British military, accidentally leaked and sent on an email to the wrong people. 19,000 names of people who had applied to move to the UK after the Taliban took power. 19,000 people, potentially, on a kill list. Oh, and politicians also trying to cover it up. The previous Conservative government applied for a super injunction to try and stop people knowing what had gone on.
Mr. Speaker, this serious data incident should never have happened. It may have occurred 3 years ago under the previous government, but to all those whose information was compromised, I offer a sincere apology today on behalf of the British government.
And look, there is so much to be sorry for. The original data breach and the subsequent actions as well. But this is the thing that really gets me. It's the way successive governments have treated people from Afghanistan who risk their lives to fight alongside British soldiers. You know, we asked them to put their trust in us, and they did, no matter the potential cost to themselves or their families. But we then didn't look after them. 19,000 people were on the list that got leaked. Only 1,500 of those people named are now in the UK. And the government also didn't even tell them that their names had been exposed. Now, at the time, we were told that the military campaign in Afghanistan was at least partly for humanitarian reasons.
We have to act for humanitarian reasons to alleviate the appalling suffering of the Afghan people and to deliver stability so that people from that region stay in that region.
But, you know, we didn't think about what we should do with the thousands of Afghans who fought alongside us. We didn't think of the end game. You know, everyone remembers those chaotic evacuation scenes from Kabul in 2021. And, you know, as for the humanitarian situation, well, the Taliban are back in control and Afghan girls have been banned from the classroom for 1,300 days and counting. Well, it's been quite the day as, you know, an immense amount of detail has been revealed. Our Defence and Security Editor, Deborah Haynes, has been across it all. She joins us now live. Debs, what is your take on this story?
Well, you summed it up brilliantly in terms of just the devastating mistake that happened in the first place and then compounded by this cover-up. So what actually happened was, you'll remember those scenes back in 2021 when the Western-backed Afghan government collapsed, the Taliban rose up, and then all of those people who had been either working directly with the British Armed Forces, such as interpreters and other staff, and then those who had specialist roles, for example, as part of Afghan Special Forces units that had been trained by the British military. They were all, even before the Taliban returned to power, under risk of torture, of assassination by Taliban militants. And then once the Taliban came back into government, there was an even greater concern for their safety. The UK government very belatedly over the years came up with this scheme to help those who were eligible for relocation or assistance to either be supported inside Afghanistan or be brought to the UK. And there were those terrible scenes when the Taliban returned to power and order, as it was, collapsed, when you saw people trying to get out and the UK government wasn't able to get all the people it wanted to out of the country. And it was in that mess that you had officials that were clearly trying to do their best, but sending emails, collecting information. And this one blunder happened in February 2022 when an email was sent by a British official which contained a list of almost 20,000 names, different people that were all applying for this Afghan relocation and assistance policy. Now, not all of them were eligible, and that's the thing to remember here as well. A lot of people whose names have been revealed on this list were going to be relocated to the UK anyway, and so many thousands, along with their families, have been moved here. But because of the breach, it increased the risk to a number of other Afghan nationals who had wanted to apply for the scheme but would not have been eligible had the breach not happened. And so the government has not only got to deal with the fact that there are many Afghan nationals who have had to come to the UK anyway, but they're breached, meaning that additional people are being brought here. And as part of the court proceedings, they've been going on behind me in the High Court, and it's only today that all this can be reported when a High Court judge agreed to allow the restrictions to be lifted. That it's been revealed that there are these 6,900 additional individuals that are being brought to the UK. The Ministry of Defence is saying it's going to cost about £850 million. But discussions that were going on in there were talking about a cost of £7 billion. And actually, the government said today that the total amount of money that the taxpayer is going to have to pay for all of the relocations, including people that would have come here anyway had the breach not happened, is going to be about £6 billion. And so you can be sure that from now on there is going to be scrutiny not only over what happened with the data breach, but also the fact that there is an increased burden, it would seem, on the UK government and public at a time when immigration is obviously also a really controversial topic, and it just leaves a lot of questions really, and uncomfortable for the government, and then more importantly a disaster for all of those people who have been named. And we spoke to one Afghan national who is here in the UK now, and he's been here since 2021. His name, he said, was on this list. He was relocated anyway, but he said he's got friends that are still in Afghanistan who are in hiding, in danger, and even though the government is saying that actually the risk is now less for them and they're not being compromised because of this data breach anymore, they clearly don't feel that, and a class action lawsuit is going to be taking place with more than 1,000 people already involved, and a British law firm overseeing that. So it's clearly a story that's only just come to light, and the repercussions are going to be felt for a long time.
Yeah, it's extraordinary, all the different strands that you've just laid out there, Deborah, as well. Thank you very much indeed for bringing us up to speed. Right, let's bring in our duo for the evening, shall we? The Conservative MP, former Cabinet Minister Sir Andrew Mitchell, and the General Secretary of the University and College Union, Joe Grady. Great to have you both with us.
Good evening.
Extraordinary day. Andrew, I'm interested to get your take on all of this. I don't know if you were aware of it back in 2023 or what you think about how it's unfolded.
Well, I was aware, and of course it is the most terrible thing, because people who had served Britain, who'd worked with our armed forces, were being put in dreadful jeopardy. And what I think the government did was exactly the right thing to do, seeking an injunction and then a super injunction, so that even the injunction couldn't be spoken about. And the reason that was the right thing was because we needed to do everything we possibly could at that stage to defend these people who had worked with British troops and worked with Britain.
You can see why, to some people, getting that super injunction felt like a cover-up, to be honest.
No, it was to protect. It wasn't done for that reason at all. It was done to protect the people who, as a result of this leak and this exposure, could have been placed in dreadful jeopardy.
But you didn't tell them, did you, either?
It was exactly, in my view, I was not the decision maker.
Yeah, I should be saying this is not, exactly, you're not the person in charge of this. But
no, and you would have to speak to the Ministry of Defence, but I am absolutely satisfied that we did the right thing in the decision that the government made to protect the lives of people for whom we had a duty of care.
So given that then, do you agree with the decision to lift the super injunction now?
Yes, because the report that has been done has made it clear that now the risk is not the same. And the advice that the government has taken was that it can be lifted now. And that's why I think both the Conservative government and today's Labour government, operating in very difficult circumstances, have done the right thing and have made the right decision.
Jo, what's your take on all this?
I think the government have done the right thing, and I don't think we can really rest until we're sure that everybody that was on this list is resettled and is safe. I do think that there is a broader issue around why these people are in danger. The UK and the USA, we helped devastate Afghanistan, and we now see the Taliban have taken control. So there is a much, I think, broader issue of people who, and your reporter, Deborah, touched on it, who would also wish to come here as well. I think Afghan was the highest nationality of people seeking to cross on small boats. We've seen the closure of 2 Afghanistan resettlement schemes. And I think we have a duty of care to a much broader group of people than just those that happen to be on this database. And I do think there's a confusing message here between, on the one hand, doing deals with Macron to make sure that people who are fleeing the Taliban can't get here, but on the other hand, quite rightly, we are spending millions of pounds to ensure that those that are on the list can get here. And I think, we have a broader duty of care than just, elites list and people making mistakes on email.
OK, thanks both very much indeed. We'll have more on this and lots more other things on the programme as well. But I did just want to bring you my interview with the Armed Forces Minister, Luke Pollard, that I did just before coming on the programme. Thank you so much for being on the programme this evening. So we've got this news of a devastating leak and then, frankly, a cover-up. What's your message to the thousands of Afghans who've been affected by this?
Well, first of all, this should never have happened. And even though it happened under a previous government, the Defence Secretary today has apologised for this serious incident where we lost the personal details of 17,814 people. It is right that we looked afresh at the situation after coming to office to reassess the threat to those individuals on that data set. We believe it now to be considerably lower than the previous government had assessed. As such, we felt it was the right moment to be able to close that secret resettlement route and to put this information into the public domain so the media, so the public and Parliament can correctly scrutinise what is an incredibly serious data leak with serious consequences in how press freedoms, parliamentary freedoms were conducted afterwards because of the super injunction that was put on after the leak was discovered in 2023.
I thought that you put it out there because the court told you to.
Yeah, we've been working through over many months to reassess the assessment.
Just to be clear,
that was made.
That was why this information's been public, isn't it? Because that's what the court said.
That's right, and we've submitted...
So why are you trying to say that it was you who decided to do it?
Well, we submitted to the court an independent review that we had commissioned as a government, the RIMA review, that looked afresh at the assessment that was made about the risk to people in the data set. We commissioned that review precisely because we were concerned that the level of risk and the assessment that was previously used needed to be refreshed, didn't include enough sources. That's why we undertook that work. That's why we gave that report to the court, and that enabled the judge to therefore lift the super injunction and enabled us today to put this into the public domain.
Can I ask when you first found out about this leak?
Yeah, so it was shortly after I was appointed as a minister in the Ministry of Defence in July last year. The conversation, something like, "Congratulations, Minister, there's something we need to tell you." I was utterly shocked. In opposition, I had raised concerns around the previous government's handling of the Afghan relocation scheme and the data leaks that had been in the public domain, even in opposition from their handling. But I was utterly shocked by the severity of this data leak and the measures that had been put in place.
Can I just ask, because the Times have published an email from August 2023 that says you were informed about this breach by an activist who was effectively helping out Afghans get to the UK, and it also copied in the then Armed Forces Minister James Heappey. Is that correct or not?
So I'm not privy to everything that happened under the last government, because one of the traditions that we have in British government is that a new government doesn't receive all the advice that was provided by the last government. That's provided
they're
to
saying
former ministers.
That there was an email that you were informed, but that's not the case.
No, so I was in opposition in 2023, so I wasn't privy to those conversations that took place. But broadly, the Ministry of Defence was made aware around that time, and it was at that point
I understand that point. Sorry, I don't want to... I understand the point you're making, but the campaigner is saying that you were copied into an email.
So I think the concern that we've got is that the government at the time made difficult decisions around this situation. We're not privy to all that information, but we are certainly alive to the fact that in most respects, we think they made it in good faith. This was a hard decision. There were no good and easy options.
Just to go back to the what is saying here, the campaigner is saying that they effectively, wrote to the Armed Forces Minister at the time, James Heappey, nothing to do with you, I got that, but then copied you into that email. The Times then publishing that email.
Well, I'm not aware of that particular that email, because I'm not privy to all those events at that time. What I think did happen at the time is the government at the day took a difficult decision. It was right that, I think, as a new government facing this unprecedented super injunction, that we look again at the situation, that we were able to reassess it, and that is what we did, and that enables us to effectively make those changes that the Defence Secretary announced to Parliament today.
Can we just find out, can you just talk me through what is going to happen to the people on the list now? Because as I understand it, some of the people on this list have a very clear claim to come to the UK. For example, they may have fought alongside British troops, others potentially not. But 19,000 people's details were leaked. Around 1,500 of them, I believe, are being relocated to the UK. So I guess my question is, what is going to happen to the rest of the people whose names and details were on this list?
The Ministry of Defence is providing advice and protective advice as to what individuals might be able to do. But because the assessment that we have now made about the risk being lower in that respect means that we are ending the relocation progress for those people that were deemed at the highest risk, but we are honouring the 600 or so invitations that still remain outstanding, because when Britain makes a promise, it's right that we deliver on that promise. So there's still some work that will need to be underway to bring those people that we've made a commitment to relocate to honour that commitment that has been made.
You say there about Britain making a promise and how important it is to honour that promise. And I get, the thing that gets me about the story is this, because it feels like, when Britain and America went to Afghanistan, we asked people to put their faith in us. We asked them to fight alongside us, to put themselves at risk, to put their families at risk. And it seems to me like, successive politicians have treated them in an utterly careless way, not allowing them to come to the UK, exposing their personal details in a data leak, and they're not even telling them about it. I mean, how can anyone have trust in us again?
I mean, it is precisely the reason, Sophie, that we wanted to be able to look at this afresh and to take a different decision, because it's absolutely necessary that when Britain makes a commitment, we honour it. And certainly the commitment that we have made, and indeed is supported on a cross-party basis, but I think with nearly every party in the House of Commons, that
feels like there's
for the Arab scheme, that we deliver all of that commitment that we've made to people who fought and served alongside UK forces. We will complete that obligation. We roughly have
I guess I'm just trying to go to, a slightly wider point here. That we had this military intervention. We went in there. We didn't think about the end game. We've seen that with the completely chaotic evacuation schemes. We said it was for humanitarian reasons, and now the Taliban is back in control, and women and girls haven't been in schoolrooms for 3 years. Why should people trust us with this carelessness?
I mean, the way that the UK pulled out of Afghanistan was not good. And I think it has had consequences for the way that we are sometimes perceived. Indeed, it does for the other allies that pulled out at the time, the United States included. As a new government, we've taken the approach that we need to rebuild our connections with many of our allies internationally, and we need to, where issues like this existed, we need to honour our obligations that we have made, and we backed in opposition to those people who served alongside our forces. We will continue to do that. There's roughly 34,000 people that have relocated to the UK, and there's roughly about 24,000 applications still to be processed. We will process all of those, assess the eligibility, and where people are found eligible under the ARAP scheme, the commitment we've made to relocate people who served for and with our forces, we will deliver that. And our aim is to conclude all relocations by the end of this Parliament by 2029.
OK, thank you very much indeed for being on the programme this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, of course, this huge leak is sure to feature in tomorrow's newspapers. We'll have our extended press preview from 10:30 this evening with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us will be the journalist and broadcaster Jenny Kleeman and the chief executive of the Total Politics Group, that's Martin Wallace. Just got a little bit of breaking news to bring you that's just come through to us in the last few minutes, because John Torode, of course, the MasterChef presenter, who has been sacked from the BBC, has posted a statement on his Instagram account this evening. Now, it's after an allegation that he used an extremely offensive racist term, and it was upheld in a report. Now, he's saying that nobody from the BBC or from the production company Badenoch has spoken to him about its MasterChef contract not being renewed. The statement reads, although I haven't heard from anyone at the BBC or Badenoch, I'm seeing and reading that I've been sacked from MasterChef, and I repeat that I have no recollection of what I'm accused of. The inquiry could not even state the date or year of when I'm meant to have said something wrong. He then goes on to say, I'd hoped that I'd have some say in my exit from a show I've worked on since its relaunch in 2005, but events in the last few days seem to have prevented that. Over the last few months, I've been considering my life and the shape of it now and in the future. Celebrity MasterChef, which I recently filmed with Grace Dent, along with 2 fantastic Christmas specials, will be my last. Personally, I've loved every minute working on MasterChef, but it's time to pass the cutlery to someone else. For whoever takes over, love it as I have, I'll watch fondly from afar as I now focus on the many other exciting projects that I've been working towards. That statement there from John Torode after the news that he's been sacked from the BBC's MasterChef. Right, turning to the economy now, because Rachel Reeves is set to deliver her Mansion House speech tonight to finance and business leaders. And we've already been getting some hints about what to expect. Let's chat to our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, shall we? So, Sam, what have you been picking up?
So this is one of the big set pieces for a Chancellor in a year. The Mansion House speech is where the Chancellor comes to face with essentially the city. And in that light, perhaps the lines that we are being told about are relatively unsurprising. The big picture is that this Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, wants more growth. I mean, which Chancellor doesn't want that? And in order to achieve that, she is committing to deregulate, to reduce the administrative burdens on business, to promote higher wages around the country, and to do more, all of which is fairly familiar. I think Jeremy Hunt, her predecessor, could have said much the same. But there are a couple of specific announcements, one of which we know about this evening. One of the things that she's promising is she's going to make it easier for people on slightly lower wages to buy a house. In particular, she's going to make sure that people on £30,000 a year can get mortgages 6 times their salary. Now, at the moment, it's £35,000 can get 6 times salary. That's going to reduce to £30,000. Now, the Treasury thinks that that's going to help about 30 to 35,000 people. I suppose the question, Sophie, is whether or not that's actually addressing some of the big picture fundamentals of the economy. I want to just show you something on the screen behind me. If you take a look at this, it is a look at house prices. Back in 1995, so this is 30 odd years ago, the average house price was £51,000. Now, you look at this today, and it is up at £265,000. Now, I think, as you can see, the value of houses, the cost of houses, has gone up far more than wages. I mean, really, for some people, this is a graph that shows this true scale of intergenerational unfairness that there is in this country. Now, Perhaps helping people get easier access to mortgages can deal with part of that problem, but I think graphs like that suggest that maybe the real issue is elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, just look at that. It says such a clear story, doesn't it, Sam? I guess the backdrop to the speech, though, is the overall fiscal picture and the black hole that we've been discussing for weeks now.
That's right. That does feel like the elephant in the room for this government. In November, they're going to have to address what we think is potentially a £20 billion black hole, which it sounded as if they were going to have to fill pretty much entirely with tax rises. But I just wonder whether over the last 24 hours we haven't discovered a potential little bit of wiggle room that the Chancellor might have in her fiscal rules. Now, I've been looking at the detail of the fiscal rules, and if you go deep into the documents published by the Treasury, you discover this, that there is a proviso that from 2027, actually, Rachel Reeves can miss her target that only day-to-day spending will be funded by taxation and not borrowing. She can miss it by about £15 billion under a little bit of wiggle room that she gets in a couple of years' time. Now, I've picked up chatter in the city and from people talking to government about whether or not they might bring that forward, whether or not they might bring forward the moment at which you can access a little bit of extra borrowing. Now, I put that to the Treasury. Early this morning, they released this statement. The fiscal rules as set out in the Charter for Budget Responsibility are ironclad and non-negotiable, as are the definitions of the rules set out in the document itself. I suppose the question is whether or not changing those provisions around the wiggle room would amount to the definition or not. It strikes me it's still a bit opaque. They have left themselves a little bit of space to do this. But I have to say, Sophie, that if the government is planning to borrow a bit more to get out of its black hole, then there may be serious consequences in the market who are nervous about the sheer scale of borrowing that we are already undertaking in this country.
OK, Sam, thank you very much indeed. Always interesting to chat on the programme. Seb Coates there, our Deputy Political Editor. Right, let's chat again, shall we, to Joe and Andrew. I mean, Joe, that graph that Sam was just reflecting on, I mean, it really does say an awful lot about the position of the economy, doesn't it?
It does. And, you know, since the election, Labour have stumbled from disaster to disaster, trying to stick to these fiscal rules, you know, whether that's the winter fuel payments, the most recent welfare bill, and, you know, I think either ineffectively communicating their policy or just asking very vulnerable people to pay the price. And I think that, you know, for working people, I don't think they're going to be wanting to hear the Chancellor talking about fiscal responsibility. You know, for regular people, they want to know how she's going to start ensuring that tax-dodging millionaires pay their share. They want to know why their wages are stagnating, and that goes, you know, a long way to explaining why house prices are just completely unaffordable for people. In 1995, the average annual salary for full-time workers was just under £17,000. So 3 times their earnings could secure a house. Now it's £37,000 for full-time earners. You know, I don't think reducing the limit is the issue here when you can qualify. The issue is that we are seeing a stagnation of wages. And we are seeing this at a time when if you are a shareholder or a company, your profits are soaring. So I think what people are wanting from Labour is a plan, is some ambition and dedication that they're going to end inequality, that they're going to end poverty, and that we're going to build a society and an economy that delivers for everybody and doesn't just allow those at the top to flourish.
Andrew, what would you say to some of what Joe was just saying?
Well, I agree with Joe that this government has stumbled from one disaster to another. And remember, when they came in, we now know they came in with no proper strategy at all. But when they came in, they said their guiding star was growth. But they've done a whole load of things which have damaged the ability to achieve growth, not least piling taxes and burdens onto business, particularly small business, which is where growth comes from. But in terms of what Sam said, and tonight, you know, the thing they've got to be very careful about is what the markets say, because, you know, the markets are not interested in smoke and mirrors. They're interested in the economic underlying reality. And the people she's got to convince tonight are the bond markets, those who lend money to Britain, that she is running a sound economic policy. And, you know, we'll see whether she can do that. The talk about deregulation, you know, you'll remember when Gordon Brown deregulated and the problems that came from that, but equally a lot of regulation in the city from which I came originally now does not deter the villain, but makes it more difficult for the honest person plying an honest trade. So, dealing with regulation, addressing the markets, that's what she's got to do tonight. And, in opposition, you don't wish the government well, but you do wish your country and the economy well. And, I hope in one way that she can make sure that the markets are convinced, because if she doesn't, the impact on ordinary people's lives will be very great.
I mean, I guess in a way it was the markets that kind of shored up Rachel Reeves, though, right? Because when they thought it looked like she was going to lose her job or someone was going to come in and potentially break those fiscal rules, they reacted pretty negatively.
Yeah, I didn't come into journalism to talk about fiscal rules. But
Are you sure, Sam? You do seem to enjoy it.
I seem to talk about them an awful lot. These are the self-imposed borrowing limits that Rachel Reeves has set herself. And yes, you're right that perhaps the markets showed some faith in Rachel Reeves by worrying that she might no longer be there because another Chancellor might be prepared to borrow a bit more. But if you take a step back, the biggest problem I would worry if I was in government would be that we've created a bit of a doom loop situation. Later this year, she's got to make sure that she doesn't miss her fiscal rules, and that's probably going to mean quite hefty tax rises. But next year, if she has to find more money for spending, she's going to have to replace that with tax rises again. And this cycle is going to repeat itself because we've got incredibly aggressive fiscal rules, borrowing limits, and every time there's a black hole, there's spending that isn't anticipated, something goes wrong in the global economy, you've got to find money for something, it's got to be funded by finding cash elsewhere. She's in this cycle pretty much for the whole Parliament. I don't see how we don't end up having this conversation twice a year for the whole of the rest of the time she's Chancellor.
Sure, I guess you probably agree with some of that.
Yeah, but I think the issue is that there's an alternative reality for working people, and alongside the trend and pattern that has allowed us to see the increasing housing prices, which is in some way has links back to moves away from building societies to banks, but also the decline in what is a real wage for people. That has happened alongside relentless attacks on trade unions. It's happened alongside increasing red tape to allow trade unions, or that prevents trade unions from effectively representing people. So Labour have to ensure, in addition to all of the kind of challenges that you've just mapped out, they have to ensure that they are introducing laws that are going to allow working class people to regain some of the industrial power that they've had. And some of that will happen with the Employment Rights Bill, but not enough is. We're still going to have fire and rehire. We're still going to have, people living and working in poverty. There are things that Labour could do. We could investigate a wealth tax. We cannot allow a situation in this country that we've now had for decades where wages continue to fall, where workers can't make ends meet at all.
And I guess, you were mentioning there about growth, Andrew, but, this is a problem that successive governments have grappled with, right? Growth's been kind of flat as a pancake for a while now.
Well, yes, and productivity, of course, is something which the government needs to tackle, just as we were seeking to tackle it before the last election.
Really interesting to talk to all of you. Thanks for getting your thoughts, and Sam as well, as always, good to have in the Politics Hub. Lots of coverage, of course, of the Rachel Reeves speech later on this evening. In the meantime, you're watching the Politics Hub. Coming up, a new report says anti-Semitism is a stain on British society that refuses to be consigned to history. I'll be joined by the co-author, that's the former Defence Minister, Dame Penny Mordaunt, to talk about the recommendations it makes.
are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Hello, welcome back. Now, you may have seen some newspaper headlines over the weekend saying anti-Semitism has been normalised in middle-class Britain, and those reports were based on a review commissioned by the Board of Deputies of British Jews that was released today, and it says anti-Semitism is a stain on British society that refuses to be consigned to history. Also features a series of recommendations, including improvements to NHS training, policing standards, guidance for school teachers, and measures to make sure Jewish people are not discriminated against by professional bodies. Well, the report was co-authored by the former Defence Secretary, Dame Penny Mordaunt, who's here with us now. Thanks very much for being with us.
Good evening.
You're here to talk about an important report, but before we do speak about that, I was keen to get your reaction to the news that we've learned today, that there are these 19,000 names of Afghans leaked in 2022, and then the previous Conservative government effectively tried to cover it up. What's your take on all this?
Well, I'm sure Parliament's very shocked to hear this, and I understand completely, as Andrew Mitchell alluded to earlier, why people have been so cautious and wanting to make sure that layer on layer of injury wasn't added to this terrible data breach. I do think, though, there is an issue about what Parliament is aware of and how Parliament can scrutinise these things and get to know about them without it having to be in the public domain and on the floor of the House. And I've long argued that on issues like this and on special forces operations, which are evolving, that the Intelligence and Security Committee in Parliament, which is like a select committee, but it is secret, it has MPs on it, senior ones usually, and it currently takes information usually from the intelligence agencies, but not defence. And that is a forum where you could, I think, share certain information to help keep departments honest, but it be protected.
Because this is the thing, isn't it? I think sometimes from an outside perspective, you look at it and you think, this is a massive data breach, potentially people's lives at risk, and millions of pounds of public money as well involved in it. Surely we've got a right to know about it.
Yes, I mean, that are all the reasons why Parliament, in some capacity, ought to be cited on some of these things. But understandably, the priority, and I think that's the right one, is to make sure that people who we have a moral duty to are protected.
When did you first learn about it?
Well, today.
Today, yeah.
Yes.
And do you think that, how do you think as well about the way that we've treated, I guess, the Afghans historically as well? These people who fought alongside us, they trusted us. Do you think we failed them?
Well, look, I think that this data breach, but also the way that we withdrew from Afghanistan because the Americans decided that they weren't going to stay there, has done tremendous damage to our reputation. These things are not easy, and in the schemes that went before those incidents, I mean, I can remember, for example, a case of somebody who had served alongside our armed forces, had armed forces personnel willing to vouch for them, but we knew that through forensics they had been working for the Taliban in laying IEDs. So sometimes information in the public domain is not the whole story, but by and large we have a huge debt to these people. I'm glad to hear that the case of the triples, as they're known, but those people that were special forces and worked absolutely hand in glove with our special forces guys, their cases are still open and they're still being looked after, and those that have applied to the scheme will still be able to come here.
I'm keen to talk about this report into anti-Semitism in the UK, with the recommendation of an anti-Semitism training qualification. What are the headlines, do you think, from what the report found?
Well, look, this is, I mean, I didn't expect to be shocked in the evidence sessions we took, but I was, and it's about people's experiences going about their everyday lives, of being in the workplace, of using public services. So, for example, we took evidence from people who've chosen to do a particular profession, they were teachers or social workers, for example, who have to be a member of a particular professional body or a trade union in order to get the indemnities that they need to work. being appallingly abused in those situations. They don't have a choice to engage with those organisations. So we've suggested some things that could be done to prevent that. If you are in a role where you are primarily there to look after the welfare, care, safety and security of others, you work in the NHS or Transport for London, or you're a university welfare officer looking after vulnerable disabled people, you shouldn't be wearing political symbols at work. You shouldn't be doing things that put a barrier up between you and the person that has to trust you. These are very practical things we're suggesting.
How do we decide what a political symbol is? Like, is a poppy a political
Well,
symbol,
it's up to the employer. And what we're trying to do through this is not create loads of legislation. You can't create that duty of care we have to each other via legislation. This is about giving employers some really good ideas to recognise what anti-Semitism is and to tackle it where it has set root in particular organisations. And we now have the evidence and case studies to show that.
You said that you want consistent decision-making and standards across all police forces, for example, throughout the country. Do you think anti-Semitism is treated less seriously than other forms of racism by the police?
I think what we found was that there are some police forces, understandably, that deal with this a lot. If you're the Metropolitan Police, you're dealing with issues about protesting and policing these matters. You have huge experience. In other parts of the country, you don't. And it's all of the good practice that exists in parts of the police force across the UK, enabling that to be consistent across the whole of the UK. And it's not just about what happens in the police force, it's about how they liaise with community groups, how they liaise with the security organisations that look after the Jewish community, and how they can access additional funding to help them do that. Big inconsistencies across the UK on that.
Great to have you on the programme tonight. Thank you so much for being with us. Penny
Thank you,
Mordaunt,
Sophie.
there. Now, support for Reform UK among women in their 40s and 50s has almost doubled since the general election, but the party is still dominated by men. Well, a new strategy is aiming to change that, with Reform focusing on issues they believe will bring more women into the fold. Our political correspondent, Serena Barker-Singh, has been looking into Reform's new strategy. She has this report.
Well, there is a lot more than how you say it. We'll get the women in.
Reform UK aren't generally popular with women.
There's a little bit too much testosterone in Reform.
Yeah, there's a lot of testicular fortitude.
It does attract women, but and where to come?
And they've started to notice.
I think it's a huge gender divide. I think it's actually a massive problem.
Only 7% of young women said they would vote for the party.
There are plenty of women in our group.
There are loads of ladies involved in Reform, my sister being one of them.
Their signature blokey style instead tends to attract older men.
Every party is dominated by men because more men are interested in politics than women are.
Men stand up for what they believe in.
Now they're pivoting to issues where they see opportunity.
They are speaking up about transgenderism, defining what a woman is.
Bringing high-profile women into the fold.
You won't find me down the pub with a pint.
You see another woman's actually really positive, then it does encourage so many other women.
So, will Reform's newest recruits become some of the party's biggest cheerleaders?
You can't win a UK general election without the support of women.
Young campaigner Jess Gill says Reform appealed to her when she fell out of love with Labour.
I'm working class, I'm Northern, I'm a woman. Based on the current, stereotypes, that would probably be the party for me. I think even then I had a problem with wokeness, and then when Keir Starmer knelt for Black Lives Matter, I just thought, it's beyond redemption.
So young women, 71% of women strongly dislike the party.
Is that women or young women?
Young women.
Yeah.
And 9% of young women, only 9% like Nigel Farage.
OK, women are kind of fed up of men not being real men. I think Starmer's a bit of a wimp in all honesty, and I think he's hard to respect with that. Whereas Nigel, I'm not his biggest fan, I have his criticisms, but overall, I think he's a funny guy, he's hard not to like. He gives the same vibes as Trump in a way.
After the last general election, less than 20% of Reform candidates were women, and these were the 5 men elected. But in the locals, they released this promotional video.
I'm a mother, and a mother's instinct is to protect her family, and I feel I have the same instincts to protect my country.
Signalling a real push to draw more women into the party. Andrea Jenkins and Sarah Pochin were promoted by the party and won top jobs at the locals, helping to lure in new recruits, like Catherine, who had never been involved in active politics before.
If you look at the policies, I just think they're common sense. Crime, family, law and order, all of those issues are women's issues.
Would you say, motherhood, families are a core part of what Reform are offering?
100%, and it's one of our core values.
This is HQ, so this is our little reception area, and
that's Nigel Farage's office.
The big one's Nigel's office.
And what's over here?
So this is the team down here. We won't walk down there, but this is the team. So we're absolutely chocker in here. We need new offices, but we're going to go into the boardroom today.
Reform now have their first woman MP, Sarah Pochin, who won a by-election in Runcorn. She used her first question in Parliament to ask this.
Will he, in the interests of public safety, follow the lead of France, Denmark, Belgium and others and ban the burqa?
Yeah. Prime Minister.
The thing about Reform is we're raising issues that the other parties won't raise. So come, and we want you to come, but we're going to only take people that are brave enough to raise these issues. Stand up and talk. Look at my burqa question.
Let's talk about that burqa. Do you think that's really an issue that's helping women, all women?
The question has to be punchy. You don't have long, and so I use the burqa to get the attention of to start the debate. People say, women are happy to wear those. Are they really? Would you want to be clothed in a cloth, a black, hot, they can't, how do you eat through it? I mean, the whole thing is misogynistic.
Muslim women have chosen to wear that.
Some have chosen, some are made to wear it. The point is, it's great to start this debate.
They have been pivoting to speak about issues that potentially women might be more interested in. Do you think this is part of the strategy of attracting women to the party?
I'm sure it must be part of the strategy. And again, when we speak to women, particularly old women in focus groups, there is often a sense that women's issues have been neglected.
Alex Phillips was the right-hand woman to Nigel Farage during the Brexit years. She's still very close to senior members in the party and a card-carrying member of Reform.
For too long, we've lived in a society where even raising concerns has been considered taboo.
A cynic might say that perhaps senior figures in the party are talking about these issues, perhaps to get more women on side.
I think they're talking about these issues because these are big issues.
You don't see it as a political opportunity?
Well, look, an issue in politics is a political opportunity, and what democracy is for is actually putting a voice to and representation to concerns of the general public. That's what politics is all about.
Making inroads with women will be a hard task for a party historically dogged by controversy and clashes. Representation will remain a sore spot for Reform UK, but now they think it could be a window of opportunity as well. Serena Barker-Singh, Sky News.
Let's talk again to Andrew and Joe, shall we? I mean, Andrew, it seems to me that there's always been a bit of a gender gap historically with Reform, with men much more likely to vote for Reform than women. I mean, if that starts to close, then you really are in trouble, aren't you?
But look, Reform don't have any policies. I mean, if you read what they say, they are a protest party and they ventilate grievances. When people come to vote in the general election, that won't be enough. They will look at what is being offered, and that's a gender-neutral approach. People, men and women, will look at what they're offering, how they would run the country, how they would deal with these difficult economic problems that we and the Labour Party now are grappling with, and then they'll make a decision. I think one of the problems at the moment is that the Tories were heavily dispatched in a big election defeat last year. Labour is making a huge number of mistakes and appears to be strategy-free. So a lot of people who traditionally would have moved between the two main parties are rejecting both those parties at the moment and looking elsewhere. But I think as serious policy issues rise up the agenda, the difference between men and women supporting Reform will fall away. They'll make a decision about which party has the right policies.
Joe, just on the women thing, because I just feel sometimes, right, we kind of lump women together.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure we ever talk about men, how men vote in the same way. Do you know what I mean? It's like we talk about over half of the population here, and obviously women are going to vote in such different ways. Right?
Yeah, of course.
It's hard to generalise.
Well, the last time I was on this show, I shared the seats here with Sarah Pochin. And, the next day she was in Parliament asking that incredibly divisive question about banning the burqa. So I don't think we can put the fact that women are, turning, in albeit small numbers, to reform down to them electing more women. In politics, people listen to what you say and what you do. And in large numbers still, women are rejecting reform's message. And I think, many women across many demographics are going to be asking different questions of Labour at the minute on pay, on pensions, on my career, on maternity leave. For those that are already mothers, they're going to be saying, what kind of world is my child going to inherit? What are the schools like? How are we going to fix the NHS? To be clear, Reform have no answers to these questions. I think there's an element of people knowing that Labour aren't actually answering those questions at the minute either. So people are kind of tossing a coin and thinking maybe we'll give Reform a chance. So I think the real issue here is not what Reform are doing, it's what Labour aren't doing. So this is a stark moment for Labour. And as I said earlier, the only way that they're going to kind of get through this issue are reconnecting with their base, reconnecting with people that would have automatically voted Labour and are now looking elsewhere, and offering some real solutions to the problems that, regardless of gender, working people face.
I mean, it's a reflection on Labour Reform's success, but I guess it's also a reflection on the Conservative Party as well, right? That there's an awful lot of former Conservative voters and some former Conservative MPs, right, who are making the switch.
Yeah, I mean, people who at the last election said they couldn't vote Conservative, they didn't like the record of the then government. Those people will return to the Conservative Party when they see that the Conservatives have done the work on policy, and they can say they've now done the work, they've worked out what the right policy answers are. I feel I can return. And I'm very confident, that the Tory party will recover from this, and that Reform, while they are basically just ventilating grievance, as Joe was saying, while they're doing that, they may get a lift artificially, but they won't in an election when people are having to choose between policies.
I think it's a bit more bleak than that, because they are ventilating grievances, but you have Kemi, stirring up grievances at every moment. To be fair, we've also had Keir Starmer, engaging in finger-pointing as well, whether that's against migrants or other kind of vulnerable communities. And I think that there is a real breeding ground and normalisation right now of some of the very hateful messages that Reform are putting out. And then we also have the problem, and the Tories don't offer anything on this either, how are we going to materially improve the lives of working people? Labour aren't offering things at the moment that are actually helping people. I don't think the Conservatives would either, because it would be, a huge break from what I've seen over the last 15 years. So we are in a problem, and we're in a problem that if people are going to toss this coin and vote for Reform, if we end up in a position where they get elected, things will get worse. The NHS won't exist, and we'll all have to deal with that.
I would disagree with that. I think what the Conservatives are saying about the importance of growth. Look how inflation is now much higher than it was when we left office. Look at the points. Look at the points we're making about how you get growth, and you need growth and economic success to lift wages. I think the Tories have got a good message, which in time, after the last election has receded into the background, with time, I'm absolutely confident the Tories will have a message, particularly on the economy, which will resonate with people.
Can I just say, though, if you are represented by my unions, you work in colleges or universities, your pay has fallen by 25 to 30% over the last 15 years. So, you haven't produced wage growth with economic growth. What you've produced is a breeding ground for people to search for these alternatives. And we need drastic change from Labour to produce a much more equal society.
OK, really interesting debate. Thanks both very much indeed. Now, in just over an hour's time, Rachel Reeves is going to be stepping out in her best attire to address some city bigwigs on her plans for the industry. The speech at Mansion House is a time-honoured annual tradition for whoever holds a post as Chancellor, so cue bow ties and ball gowns aplenty.
King George VI.
National governments will have every incentive to minimise inflation.
The economy is not like a pot noodle, if you remember pot noodles, my Lord Mayor. You cannot, with an economy, just add hot water and stir.
Britain is on the mend, but it will take time.
Let's talk again to Andrew and Joe, shall we? I love it. I love the fact that I'm not sure the pot noodlers are really knowing the audience there. I'm not sure that's how many of those city bankers are going to be going home for a pot noodle. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm wrong. Andrew, have you been to one of these before?
I've never been to the Chancellor. I've been to dinners at the Mansion House, and they are, a wonderful example of, Downton Abbey and that sort of style of thing. And they're great fun. They're very well done, and they are a collection of people who, in tonight, there'll be a collection of people who make very important, powerful decisions within the economy. So it's a very important occasion. And for all the lavish and spectacular dining that you see, the reaction of the people who are there to what the Chancellor says is incredibly important for the lives of all of us.
What do you make of it all?
I find it absolutely stomach-churning, I'm not going to lie. I think, you'll have hundreds of thousands of children tonight going to bed with empty bellies, and you've got, people dripping in designer gear, eating off, silver and chinaware, making decisions that are not going to help them at all. And you may expect that from a trade union leader, but I really think it, the little shots that you just showed us demonstrate the very worst of kind of the British class system, and, a snapshot into who's making decisions in a completely detached way, whilst joking about food that they would probably never have to even eat, and people will be queuing from food banks to get.
There you go. Andrew, what do you think? What do you say
About what?
About, I guess, that it's everything that's wrong with the British class system.
Well, I think it's slightly over the top. But as I say, the point is that it's what she says there that is by far the most important thing. Forget about whether people are having a nice meal or not. What she says is incredibly important, because that will affect the lives of the people you represent and all of us.
But it's never just what's said in Britain, as if it was just what is said, it wouldn't be along with all of that pomp. And to have something like that, especially in this moment, when we have more food banks in the UK than branches of McDonald's, it's stomach-churning.
Well, that's it from us tonight. But, of course, you can watch that speech later on this evening. I will see you tomorrow at 7 p.m. Up next, it's the UK Tonight with Sarah J. Mee. And then at 9 p.m, we've got The World with Yada Hakeem, where we'll hear that Mansion House address from the Chancellor.